The first communiqué arrived on a Tuesday, nestled amongst the usual junk mail and bills, an innocuous-looking email from the Harmony Creek Estates Homeowners Association. Subject: Exciting new community amenity. I almost deleted it unread. Almost. Then the name Brenda Novak, HOA president, snagged my attention. Karen. My internal designation for her, a woman whose quest for absolute dominion over our tranquil, overpriced suburb knew no bounds. I clicked it open. The words swam before my eyes, a surreal assault of bureaucratic cheerfulness. Dear residents, it began. The HOA board is thrilled to announce the expansion of our shared recreational facilities. Effective immediately, the body of water commonly known as Henderson Lake and its adjoining shoreline will be integrated into the Harmony Creek amenities package, available for all residents to enjoy. It went on, detailing plans for a community lake day, complete with a schedule for kayaking, paddleboarding, and a family fun swim zone. My lake, my water. The Henderson family had owned this land, this spring-fed lake, for 3 generations, long before Harmony Creek Estates was a developer's fever dream. The deeds were crystalline, the water rights predating the subdivision by nearly a century, registered, recorded, and utterly, unequivocally mine. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a declaration of war, delivered with the condescending smile of a petty tyrant who believed her 5-person board held sway over God and county property records. They had crossed a line etched not in sand, but in stone and law. They simply didn't know who they had just crossed. They couldn't possibly. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it choked me. My grandfather, a man who believed property rights were sacred and lawyers were a necessary evil, he was glad his grandson had become, would have had an aneurysm. I, however, felt a cold, familiar calm descend, the kind that precedes a meticulously planned demolition. Brenda Karen Novak had just mistaken my desire for quiet enjoyment for weakness. A fatal error in judgment. She was about to receive an education in riparian law so thorough, so intensely personal, it would be seared into the HOA's collective memory for generations. This wouldn't be a shouting match over a fence line. This would be a clinical, legally lethal dissection. I spent that evening not in fuming indignation, but in quiet preparation. From the dense woods bordering the far side of my property, a buffer of old-growth trees that had thankfully escaped the developer's chainsaw, I observed Karen and 2 of her board acolytes. They were on my land, clipboards in hand, pointing, gesturing, planning the desecration of my family sanctuary. They were discussing safety buoys for my dock and erosion control for my shoreline, as if their pronouncements lent their trespass legitimacy. Zip, my young, perpetually wired neighbor, a benignly anarchic tech prodigy who owed me for bailing him out of a minor misunderstanding involving a drone and the mayor's prize-winning poodle, had, with uncanny prescience or perhaps just boredom, already aimed one of his experimental long-range wildlife cams towards the lake. The footage would be time-stamped, irrefutable. Back in my study, the scent of aged paper and binding leather, a comforting bulwark against the encroaching idiocy, I began to draft. Not an angry email, but a cease and desist order so cold, so precise, it could have induced hypothermia. It cited state statutes on trespass, private property rights, riparian law, and the specific, glaring deficiencies in the HOA's own covenants regarding such fantastical overreach. It demanded written assurance within 48 hours that Community Lake Day was canceled and that no HOA representative or resident would set foot on my property again. A copy for Karen. A copy for each board member. A copy for their laughably inept legal counsel. A firm specializing in ambulance chasing, not complex property law. Personal service. No wriggle room. My professional designation, Water Rights Specialist Henderson Associates, wasn't brandished. It was simply there, a quiet testament to the arsenal she was unknowingly facing. They thought this was a neighborhood spat. They were about to learn it was a master class in legal warfare, and I held all the cards, owned the table, and had written the damn rulebook they were so blithely ignoring. The calm I felt wasn't serenity, it was the focused quiet of a predator. The process server, Marcus, an ex-Marine whose expressionless demeanor could chill lava, timed his delivery with theatrical perfection. Karen was mid-flow at a pre-lake day planning session in the clubhouse, regaling her sycophants with visions of communal bliss at their new lake. Marcus's polite but firm, "Brenda Novak?" cut through her monologue like a scalpel. The legal envelope hitting the Formica tabletop sounded, on Zip's subsequent audio recording, like a gunshot in a library. Then the shriek, "What is this? Who does he think he is?" The rustle of official paper. "Cease and desist? He can't do this. It's for the community." Her voice, usually a finely tuned instrument of condescending authority, cracked with a satisfying tinge of genuine panic. The 48-hour fuse was lit. My wife, Sarah, her eyes dark with worry, asked, "Are you sure, Michael? She's a bulldog." I merely smiled, a thin, mirthless expression. Bulldogs, my dear, tend to fare poorly against tactical ordnance. The call from Mort Zuckerman, Karen's legal beagle, came the next afternoon. He whined about misunderstandings and neighborly solutions. I cut him short, my voice like chipped ice. "Mr. Zuckerman, your client has committed trespass, is planning further trespass, and is attempting to unlawfully appropriate private property. Are you familiar with stare decisis in relation to prior appropriation doctrine, or perhaps the specific county ordinances on private waterway access? I can recommend some remedial reading if your firm's resources are inadequate." A strangled gulp on his end. "A chat, Mr. Henderson, just a friendly chat." "The time for chats, Mr. Zuckerman, is when your client provides written confirmation of full compliance with every demand in the letter. You have," I glanced at my watch, "until 5 p.m. tomorrow. Otherwise, the application for a temporary restraining order, with a request for immediate punitive sanctions, will be filed by 9 a.m. the following morning. And given the evidence, it will be granted, expeditiously, and with extreme prejudice regarding costs." He was silent. He knew he was outgunned, outmaneuvered, and thoroughly outclassed. This wasn't a dispute over overgrown hedges. This was water rights. My water, my rules. The deadline passed, marked only by Karen's contemptuous silence. Worse, Zip's cameras showed her redoubling her efforts, a manic energy to her movements, as she directed a crew unloading a truly monstrous, sun-faded inflatable dragon slide onto my shoreline. She was actively encouraging others to join her folly, her voice, caught on Zip's audio, dripping with defiance. "Don't let him bully us. This lake belongs to Harmony Creek." She was no longer merely misguided. She was malicious, deliberately flouting a lawful directive. Zuckerman's eventual email was a masterpiece of bluster and legal illiteracy, accusing me of unneighborly conduct and misinterpreting community spirit. It was the final nail in her coffin. Irrefutable proof of willful intent. My family watched the carnival preparations with a mixture of disbelief and trepidation. "Dad," my son David asked, his young face etched with concern, "are they just gonna take it?" "They're going to try, son," I replied, my voice devoid of warmth. "And in doing so, they are going to learn a very painful, very public lesson." The cold fury had now crystallized into something akin to permafrost. This was no longer just about defending my property. It was about dismantling a petty fiefdom built on arrogance and ignorance. The TRO application was ready, a work of legal art, cross-referenced and exhibit-heavy, but Karen's flagrant escalation demanded more. She hadn't just crossed a line, she'd set up camp on it, thrown a party, and dared me to evict her. Challenge accepted. The game was escalating, and she was still playing checkers while I was deploying strategic warheads. Her belief in her own untouchability was about to collide with the immutable force of established law, wielded by someone who knew its every nuance, its every pressure point. The emotional undercurrent wasn't explosive. It was a deep, cold river, gathering force, ready to sweep away everything in its path. Monday morning, I filed. The ex parte motion for a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction was so thoroughly documented, so buttressed by evidence, Zip's pristine video footage, Karen's defiant pronouncements, Zuckerman's idiotic email, copies of my deeds and water rights filings stretching back to the McKinley administration, that Judge Albright, a jurist known for her incisive intellect and intolerance for legal buffoonery, granted it by 11:00 a.m. Her clerk later told me Albright remarked, "Mr. Henderson appears to have brought a cannon to a knife fight he didn't start. The order was ironclad. Cease all trespass, remove all HOA materials, and refrain from any encouragement of such activities, under penalty of contempt, fines, and potential arrest." Saturday dawned, bright and achingly beautiful, perfect for Karen's Community Lake Day. By 9:00 a.m., her minions were setting up, the inflatable dragon wheezing to life, cheap music blaring. Karen, resplendent in a sun visor and an air of smug command, surveyed her stolen kingdom. Then, 2 county sheriff's cruisers rolled silently onto my property. Deputy Miller, a man whose physical presence alone radiated authority, stepped out, TRO in hand. From my study window, coffee cooling beside me, I watched the scene unfold like a perfectly executed play. The music died. Karen's smile froze, then shattered into a mask of outraged disbelief as Miller read the order. The words "contempt of court" and "immediate arrest" hung in the suddenly still air. The sight of that grotesque dragon deflating with a mournful hiss under Miller's watchful eye was a moment of pure, unadulterated schadenfreude. Then came the signs, large, official, hammered into the earth by the deputies. "No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted by order of County Superior Court." Karen, face a blotchy crimson, tried to argue. Miller, unmoved, simply pointed to the judge's signature and suggested she consult her attorney, or perhaps a new one. The few residents not in her inner circle began to melt away, the dawning realization of her monumental miscalculation plain on their faces. My internal checklist: containment, complete. Next phase: dismantling HOA overreach and establishing punitive consequences. She thought this was about a neighborhood party. She was about to discover it was about the systematic deconstruction of her power. Karen, predictably, reacted to public humiliation with blind fury. Zuckerman, clearly operating under duress, filed a motion to dissolve the TRO, a document so riddled with errors and wishful thinking, it was practically a legal malpractice exhibit. Judge Albright dismissed it from the bench, verbally spanking Zuckerman for wasting judicial resources and, as a cherry on top, ordering the HOA to pay my legal fees for the frivolous filing. That was the first drop of blood in the water. But I wasn't finished. Karen's blatant disregard for law had opened a Pandora's box of HOA mismanagement, and I, with the help of my firm's forensic accountants and Zip's ethically dubious but incredibly effective digital sleuthing, their entire financial and operational database was on an unencrypted, guessable cloud server. Amateurs peered inside. The stench of petty corruption was overwhelming. Landscaping funds for common areas diverted to Karen's private botanical ambitions, phantom repairs to the clubhouse, payments to shell companies. It was a grifter's paradise, and I had the map. The offensive began. First, a formal demand for a full, independent audit, citing their own bylaws and the mountain of evidence Zip had unearthed. Second, liens against the clubhouse, liens against the tennis courts, liens against their bank accounts, starting with the recovery of my now court-ordered legal fees. The community pool, their pride and joy, suddenly sported notices of impending seizure. The shockwave was seismic. Karen wanted my lake as a community asset. I was demonstrating what happened when the actual community assets were jeopardized by the malfeasance of its leadership. The narrative in Harmony Creek began to pivot. I was no longer the villain. I was the unwilling catalyst, exposing a deeper rot. The calls started coming. Not angry accusations, but worried inquiries. The tide was turning. The silent majority, jolted from their apathy by the threat to their own amenities, the pool, the clubhouse, found their voice. Mrs. Henderson, a gentle soul renowned for her apple pies, cornered me, her voice trembling not with fear, but with nascent outrage. "Mr. Henderson, is it true, what they're saying about Brenda and our money?" I provided a carefully worded affirmation of the documented concerns. Her eyes, usually kind, hardened into flint. "That woman, I always knew." Others followed. Whispered confessions of past bullying by Karen, furtive deliveries of suspicious invoices. Zip's anonymous tip line became a torrent of grievances and evidence. Deputy Miller, initially just an enforcer of court orders, began to take a keener, professional interest, quietly conferring with the county prosecutor's white-collar crime unit. Karen, sensing the ground crumbling beneath her, called an emergency HOA meeting. "Defend your community," the flyers screamed, "against false accusations and outside agitators." It was a desperate last-ditch effort to rally her dwindling loyalists and paint me as the enemy. I RSVP'd with a polite, "Will attend." I wouldn't need to say much. The evidence was a loaded gun, and Karen was inviting everyone to watch her play Russian roulette with all chambers filled. Her narcissism was a tragic spectacle. She genuinely believed her force of will could bend reality. She was about to learn that reality, especially legal reality, has a rather brutal way of asserting itself against such delusions. The air in Harmony Creek was thick with the anticipation of a public execution, and Karen was unknowingly supplying the guillotine. The clubhouse meeting room pulsed with a nervous, expectant energy. Every seat was filled. People lined the walls. Karen, flanked by her two remaining bored sycophants, launched into a rambling defense, a pathetic cocktail of self-pity and accusation, portraying herself as the victim of a malicious vendetta orchestrated by me, the unneighborly interloper. When she finally, grudgingly opened the floor, Mrs. Henderson's hand shot up. "Brenda," her voice clear and steady, "about those invoices for landscaping at your personal residence, paid from the HOA account. Can you explain that?" Silence. Then a rising murmur. Karen's practiced smile faltered. A clerical error, of course. "And the $15,000 clubhouse roof repair that never happened, Miss Novak?" Mr. Rodriguez, the quiet engineer, his voice resonating with newfound confidence. Karen was visibly deflating, her face modeling. "These are baseless lies." That was my cue. I didn't even stand. "Actually, Ms. Novak." My voice cut through the room, cold and precise. "They are meticulously documented facts." Zip, at a prearranged signal, brought the projector to life. Invoices. Signed checks, time-stamped photos of HOA-paid landscapers tending Karen's prize roses. The phantom roof repair bill, followed by a sworn affidavit from the HOA's own handyman confirming no such work was ever done or needed. The unencrypted server's file structure, revealing the chaotic and compromised state of their record-keeping. Document after damning document. Deputy Miller stood impassively at the back, a silent, uniformed testament to the gravity of the situation. A resident I'd never met stood. I moved for a vote of no confidence in President Novak and the board members implicated in this mess. A chorus of "seconded." Karen was shouting incoherent babble about witch hunts and conspiracies, but her voice was drowned out by the rising tide of resident fury. The vote was a landslide. Her reign of error was over, not with a dramatic outburst, but with the rustle of incriminating paper and the quiet, determined voices of a community finally awakened. It was a symphony of legal destruction, played out with surgical precision. Her petty empire, built on bluff and bluster, had crumbled under the weight of its own corruption. The aftermath was swift. A new interim board, led by a chastened former treasurer Karen had once ousted, immediately issued a public apology to my family and me. They rescinded all actions against me and, with a humility bordering on supplication, asked if I would assist, pro bono, in redrafting the HOA covenants to explicitly protect private property rights and ensure future financial transparency. I agreed. Not for them, but for the principle, and for the future peace of my own dam property. The lesson in water law and the sanctity of private ownership was delivered not through a lecture, but through the stark, undeniable consequences Karen and her cronies faced. Civil suits from the HOA to recover misappropriated funds were already being prepared by their new, competent, and considerably more expensive legal counsel. The court ordered "no trespassing" signs around my lake came down, replaced by a single elegant stone marker near the entrance to the path. Henderson Lake, private property. Established 1903. It was a quiet statement of enduring fact, a monument to a battle fought with cold fury and won with legal finality. Karen and her husband sold their house within months, retreating from Harmony Creek under a dark cloud of disgrace and pending litigation. Zuckerman, I heard, had abruptly switched his legal specialty to uncontested divorces. My family reclaimed our sanctuary. The tranquility, once shattered, returned, deeper now, underscored by the hard-won peace. Sarah planted a defiant crimson rosebush near the dock. The lake, our lake, was once again ours, undisputed. The cost had been a period of intense, focused warfare, a channeling of righteous anger into a legally lethal campaign. But the return was absolute, the restoration of order, the reaffirmation of boundaries, and the quiet, enduring knowledge that some lines once crossed invite not negotiation, but obliteration. The winter snow now blankets Harmony Creek, a soft, deceptive shroud over the battlefield where a suburban war was waged and won. From my study, Henderson Lake is a dark, undisturbed mirror, its sanctity secured by the new fence, its gate firmly locked, psychological closure. There was a moral calculus to it all, of course. The relentless pursuit of Karen's downfall required a chilling detachment, a willingness to deploy the full, unsparing force of the law against an individual who, in her own deluded way, probably thought she was doing good. I had to become, for a time, a man whose sole focus was the strategic dismantling of another human being's power and reputation. I don't regret it. The alternative, the slow creeping theft of our heritage, the surrender to petty despotism, was intolerable. This was never just about water. It was about the fundamental right to exist on one's own land, unmolested, a right my family had held for over a century. My dormant authority, the specialized legal knowledge I possessed, had been provoked, and I had unleashed it with the dispassionate precision of a surgeon excising a malignancy. The explosive emotional undercurrents of righteous fury and protective loyalty had finally settled, leaving behind a cold, hard bedrock of vindication. Karen invited guests to swim in my lake. She didn't know I was a water rights attorney, a specialist in the very laws she so arrogantly ignored. Now, she knew. The HOA knew. The entire dam development understood, with a clarity born of public humiliation and financial consequence, exactly how real water law works, and the price of mistaking quiet strength for weakness. The fight was over. We had won. Utterly. And the lake, my lake, slept under the snow, inviolate and finally truly at peace.